Hi guys, Chris here from Tech Tablets. I'm having a look here at the Teclast X98 Pro, which has been getting far too hot. So what I've decided to do is open it up and have a look at the heatsink, or the lack of heatsink. Perhaps I've just put that copper tape over the Atom chip to see why it's getting up to 86 degrees and why it's throttling. It's just getting too hot, which is pretty unacceptable. So I've just started to open up the tablet. Now before I just show you it open, I'll just give you a couple of tips here. What I've done here. When I started to open it, the first thing I did was start from the top here with the plastic along the top. So all I did is just went along here with this pry tool. It's getting a little bit worn and it's not in a very good state, my tool, but just went along here and started from here. Now the corners are pretty tough to get open, but you can do it. You just got to go around. Later you can use something like a credit card. I just used an old credit card, a game member card here, and I use that to go along and also use that just to help get the thing open to pry it apart, because all you need to do is just pry the plastic off. Now it does have these little clips all along the side here. My volume up and down and power button, plastic button fell out, but that's easy enough to put that back in later on. And go along here and just try and unclip it. Now these clips here, if you can see, some of them have got a little bit of damage. It's not really designed to be opened. Once you open this tablet, I mean, it's really meant to be just sealed and that's it. So you can accidentally, well, I have damaged them a little bit. Now that's pretty hard to avoid. And I'm just going to go around here and later on just pry that apart a little bit more and just open it up and show you the inside here, and we'll have a look at the motherboard and we'll see the apparent space for the 4G modem that they're going to later install. That should be there on the motherboard. So I'll show you that soon. I'm just going to pause the video and get the tablet open. Okay, so here's the inside of the tablet. We can see both of the battery cells, one there, so there's two of them. Up here we have the wireless antenna. There's the small cable that's going along here, which connects into the wireless antenna there. Now we have a Crab logo here, that's the Realtek chipset. So one of these is the audio, the other one is the wireless. And here you can see there is space right here for the modem. So that's going to be the 4G LTE modem that they talked about that they're going to put in later. There's already room there for it. So they don't need to change the motherboard design, it's already there. They just need to add the components. Now there's a full-size SIM card slot right here. And here we have the GoodX touch controller for the touch digitizer panel that's on the front there. Just below here you can see the metal there. And along the sides here, that is the IPS panel there, the LG Retina screen. And we do have the 5 megapixel autofocus cameras right here, front facing, 2 megapixel camera. So it's easy enough to change those modules out if you wanted to do that, if you needed to, if they were faulty or something, or you damaged the camera. Right down here is a little microphone. Now I'm going to actually go in and open this up and see if I can have a look at the chipset to see if they put some thermal paste in there. Perhaps my unit they just didn't put enough thermal paste in there. Maybe they put too much in there. Maybe it's not got good contact with the metal here with the shielding. So it's not transferring the heat over very well, but it should be. And my plan is to try and use a thermal pad. I have one right here, thermal pad, put that on top of the chipset and then have that transferring, hopefully, the heat from the chipset onto the back aluminium case here, because the case doesn't seem to get that warm. Even though the chipset's reporting maybe 70 degrees, it's not actually warm to the touch at all. So if I could transfer some of that heat over. Now I did buy some copper shims as well here, so I thought I might put a copper shim on if there's enough space, using some thermal adhesive paste there, so to stick it on, and then use on top of that a thermal pad to transfer the heat over. So maybe, and hopefully that'll fix my throttling issue. Now it could just be my unit's just bad, I'll have a look when I get in there. Perhaps there's a bit of plastic in there or something stupid that's making it get so hot, but it shouldn't be happening, and I shouldn't have to do this, of course. Now we'll just give you a close-up look at the motherboard for those interested, that people want to do other modifications or they want to try and fit USB ports or whatnot. So there's a close look. Now we'll actually be taking some photos of this. They will be up on techtablets.com. So I'll get some macro shots, nice zoomed in and we can get a good look at everything there. So you can see there the space for the 4G modem right here. There's a controller I talked about, touch controller, and there's the camera. And there are the Realtek chipsets there. And this looks to be right here, our BIOS chip. Right there. The Eprom there. So maybe you can use a clip on that, flash it. Actually, it might not be. There's probably under here. This is where we're going to find our RAM, 4 gigabytes of RAM, eMMC in there, the Samsung, and of course the Atom X5Z8500 hidden away, protected under the shielding here. So I'm just going to remove this now and we'll have a closer look. Okay, so I've just gone along and pried this up a little bit and we'll have a look and see what they've done. Put some thermal paste on there perhaps. Now be very careful with static electricity, make sure you've earthed yourself. And okay, they have used thermal pads and don't think those thermal pads are doing a very good job at the moment. So they have put a thermal pad, this is slightly off-centered, and that thermal pad looks to be on the... So I'll remove this here and have a look and see if I can use, now that looks to be about 1 millimeter thick, those pads that are on there at the moment, so maybe I can use a higher quality one. So we can see here we do have our RAM chips there, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of course. This is our, it's hard to see, eMMC right there, and of course just under here is where the Atom is. So we have our Atom CPU just under this. I'm going to pull that off right now and we'll take a closer look there. Okay, so here's our little Atom chipset there. It's the X5Z8500. Now all it had was that thermal pad on it. Now these thermal pads might not be up to scratch. I guess there's various ways you could go about doing this. Now obviously that shielding is there for a reason, so I'm not too sure whether to keep that, put my own thermal pads on there or not. Now the thermal pads they have used, they are actually 0.05 millimeters, so that's actually half a millimeter, sorry, that's they're not a millimeter that I mentioned just before. Now I could go various ways with this. I could just put some new thermal pads on here and put a thermal pad on top of the shielding, the thicker thermal pad I have here. So I have one of 1 millimeter. Now I could put this on top of the shielding, that would have contact. I could actually use the 2 millimeter one, maybe without putting too much pressure on the back. So that would have good contact right over the top of the chipset with the back of the metal housing of the tablet. And that should transfer a lot more heat. And now I could also use the copper shims I have here. Now this one is 15 millimeters by 15 millimeters square, and I could probably put one of those perfectly on the top here, like so, and then maybe perhaps still be able to put the shielding over the top and use thermal paste on top of that. Now I do have some Arctic Silver 5 lying about somewhere, so I could put some of that, a little blob of that on top, so that will transfer heat over to the shielding and hopefully cool that down, and then use thermal pad on the top here. That would probably work quite well. And I could also go for maybe even a bigger one here, but could use that and then try and put some of the smaller ones on top of the RAM, or just use the thermal transfer, heat transfer pads, the thermal pads on top of just the RAM, and the eMMC doesn't actually have a one on there. Probably not required, it probably doesn't get hot enough for that. So various options here that you could go with. So I'm just going to have a little think about it, and hopefully just comes down to size as well. The last thing you don't want to put too much pressure on the motherboard, because that might push against the screen and you'll end up having some funny colors on the screen there, and it's probably not the best to do that. So you have to be careful with this, and again, be very careful around these very sensitive components there. Touching that with any static, I mean, you could fry the motherboard and game over. It won't work and you've just thrown away 250 US on a tablet. I'm taking that risk now here at the moment. And of course, you can do this with the X98 Air 2 if you wanted to cool it down a little bit. Maybe you're having a GPU freezing problems that some of the earlier batches had. So the F3G, you can do that as well. You have to remove the shielding, do the same kind of process, and I'll see how that goes. Okay, so what I ended up doing was putting some copper shims. Now I used the 200mm by 200mm larger one right over the top of the Atom CPU there. Now I cleaned that all up with Arctic cleaning solution, so everything's all nice and clean. Clean them all up all nicely, as well as the copper shims. Or maybe they don't probably look it on the video. There's a little bit of scratches on them, but that doesn't really matter. So the point with the larger size here, now it's not touching anything on the side there, which is important because we don't want it to connect with anything there because it could short out or cause a short, which you wouldn't want at all. So hopefully I haven't touched anything and it's still going to be able to power on. I haven't shorted anything out with any static. And I've tried to be very careful there. And I also put on the eMMC, I decided to go and just put a copper 1mm thick shim on there as well. Now that's 15mm by 15. And it's probably not even necessary, but I do think they get a little bit warm, but it's overkill that I'm doing that really. And I also put my own thermal pad 1mm thick across the top here for the RAM. Now I'm going to keep the shielding they use because that can still transfer heat away from these components onto this. And what I plan to do then is use a 1mm pad just over the center here, right where the atom is, to transfer heat over to the back of the rear case. So this should hopefully keep the atom a lot cooler and let it turbo or boost higher for longer. That's the plan. And hopefully it's all going to work out okay. So we'll just put now a little bit of thermal compound, some IC Diamond 7 I found that I had lying around from my desktop. Put a bit of that on top to transfer and just make sure it's nice and thin to move it around a little bit and transfer that just so it transfer heat, from the copper onto the aluminium, onto the metal on the top here, and that will help out. And hopefully all of this is not going to be thick enough to cause any problems with pressure on the screen. If not, then I'll have to remove probably the thermal pad from the top here. This one I'm going to put on. I'm going to have to remove that if it doesn't work out. Okay, so I've put the shielding, the heat spreader, back on top of it, and it actually sits down flush just as it does before. So I think I'm pretty good when it comes to the size of it, the height of it, that it shouldn't be putting any extra pressure yet. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is the thickness of my heat pad, my thermal pad that I'm going to put on top here to have contact with the back of the tablet shell here, the metal outer casing. I'm just a little bit worried that that's going to probably be a little bit too thick. Maybe you should have gone with 0.5 millimeter, but I don't have any at the moment with me. So if I put that on and it's putting too much pressure on, causing the screen to touch the front of the digitizer, then I'm going to have to open it back up and remove this and just go without it there and hope that the copper is going to be enough, and it should be. Now what I also did was removed they have the copper tape on the top, well not copper tape, like a metal tape. I removed this because it's only about, it's very thin, but I might need all the thinness I can get when it comes to putting this on the top. Now just a little tip here too, when you put the thermal pads on, I've seen this happen before on an old tablet, or I can't remember what it was, I think it might have been a mini PC, that it comes with plastic on the top that you need to peel off, of course. Now I've seen someone peel off just the bottom one and then leave the plastic on it, and that's not going to help things at all because it's not designed to have the plastic on it at all. So I'm just going to put this here on the top, and hopefully it's not going to be an overkill. Now having a little bit of pressure on there is kind of good too for the heat to help it disperse a little bit better there. So I'm just going to more or less put this over the top here where I think is about the middle of where the atom is. Around about there. It's not going to matter too much. As long as it's pretty much, well, it's on center, I think, about there. And make sure you remove the plastic on the top. So I'm just going to do now, remove that. And there we go. This is, I think, about the best I can do. So I have the new thermal pads on top of the RAM. I now have a 20mm by 20mm, 1mm thick copper shim that's on top of the Atom CPU. And I also went over the top and put one on top of the eMMC. Now you don't need to do that because they didn't even bother putting any thermal pads on that. Now I don't know the quality of the thermal pads that Teclast used. There's these blue ones here. I have no idea, but I mean they could be fine. So hopefully now, once I put it all back together, turn it on, I'm not going to have any 86-degree thermal throttling issues anymore. This should hopefully solve it. I hope. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong with my particular atom. It's a bad batch or something. Who knows? Alright, so I'm going to put it back together, and now I'll just hopefully if it boots up and see if it boots, and then run it and see just how hot it gets. Okay, so everything went together really well. There's no pressure on the screen with the digitizer and the IPS panel below, so there's no marks. Like if I push down here, sometimes you could see maybe a mark. When people have upgraded the battery in these tablets and it's thicker, it will put pressure on the screen and you get like a bit of a, like what people would say, a bubble in the middle. And that's just, if I push down here, you can see it. No, it's not going to happen, but oh, there a little bit. But it all went together really well. So using the 1mm thermal pad on top of the thermal heat spreader there on the back of the chipset that was around it wasn't a problem at all. Now it all went together really well. I'll just give you a tip too. Best to start when you're putting it back together is put the buttons back in, keep it up that way, and start from the bottom first and then just clip it in. And it all went well. It's actually gone together really nice and firm, and you wouldn't even know that it's been opened or modified. It's gone together really well, and I'm quite happy with the end result. And just be really careful with static. And what I should have really done probably was also unsolder the battery. Now I was a little bit careless and I didn't do that, but if you want to be extra careful and protecting your tablet, it might pay to do that as well. Just unsolder, disconnect the battery. I didn't want to go there, I didn't want to do it because I had to take my soldering iron out of the shed outside and put it on, and a little bit lazy of me. I should have probably done that and used that as a step. Now so far temperatures, idle temperatures seem pretty good. You can see right there that it's just idling at the moment around 34, and I'm going to run a couple of benchmarks here. I will run Geekbench 3 and a couple of things to get the tablet nice and hot, get it working, and just see if it peaks up to 86 degrees again. The goal here really is to have no more thermal throttling and no more affecting the performance from the heat. So if I can cure that problem, then that's great. And again, you should never have to do this to a tablet, but it's happening a lot now. These tablets, some of the CPUs are getting pretty hot on their atoms, and there's just not sufficient cooling. Now I think Teclast did a pretty good job there. It's not too bad, but maybe whatever they're using as their thermal pad here, it's quite thin. Maybe it's not very conductive. I don't know. It doesn't seem too bad, and it's not like they left the plastic on it or anything like that silly. So there was no actual manufacturing assembly fault or anything that I could see at all there. But maybe they need to put a copper heatsink, something like this or even bigger, across the whole top chipset there in contact with it. Or maybe they could even just fix the problem by adding a thermal pad on top of everything there to have contact with the rear housing, the rear metal housing. Now I know that Cube do this. Cube have done this on the i7 Stylus with its Core M, and that is a hot chip. It gets quite hot there. And what they did is also on top of where they have the heatsink, they put a thermal pad to transfer heat from that onto the back metal casing, and it works quite well. The casing gets really hot, the tablet gets hot, but it performs well and doesn't throttle, so it's good. Okay, I'm just going to run those benchmarks and I'll be back on the video and report how it's worked out. Alright, so I've just finished running a performance test here, benchmark, and that includes 3D graphics too, and it pushes the system quite hard. Now if you have a look at the temperatures, we got up to 68 degrees. I get the camera to focus. Doesn't want to focus there. So it's 68 degrees. And that is a hell of a lot lower than what it was before. I used to get up to 86, so it's a huge difference. So this has really helped out. And I don't know whether it's made my score any higher. We'll need to double check that from my first run of this benchmark that I did before the mod. But it can see there that it's already improved the temperatures. Right now you can see the current temperatures just idling there around about 38 degrees. And the hottest it got again 68 there. So far so good. The results not bad at all there. It's definitely helped. So best of luck with your own mod if you're gonna do this, and I recommend only opening up and going through all of this if you know what you're doing or you've done it before, you've got some experience in doing this. Otherwise things could go wrong and you can completely ruin your tablet, which I don't want. Thank you for watching, and I'll hopefully see you in my up and coming videos. Bye for now.